Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with New York City Jazz drummer, composer, and educator Reggie Quinerly. We caught up with him to talk about his latest and very impressive 2021 CD, New York Nowhere. His approach is a blending of traditional classic 60s sounds with the progressive music of the 2000s. He grew up in a rich musical environment and attended Houston's High School of the Performing and Visual Arts. From there, he went on to the East Coast and never looked back. He studied with the likes of Jimmy Cobb, Nash, and Kenny Washington. His stories and insights are rich ones. Enjoy.
Right on. Hey, thanks for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz today. I appreciate it.
Anytime.
So I really dug New York Nowhere, and when I started doing interviews when this pandemic started, it was like, you got an album coming out, but you can't do any live music. And now we've kind of evolved into 2021, and it almost seems like putting out an album now is almost like a live performance. There's so many people that can be pulled into the new music. What are your thoughts on this coming out during this time on Earth?
For me, well, first of all, I want to say this. I have to start off with this. I want to say that I appreciate what you do, because there's in this whole ecosystem of the arts and music, it's always nice to have an outlet that actually features the voices of the creators. So I definitely want to acknowledge that and thank you for having me here. I think in my case, I can only speak for me. I think that this had to happen. I think me releasing this project, I think it's the best time. And even in light of things being, shut down, I go back. Sometimes I have to go back to my own words. 2 projects ago, I released an album entitled Invictus. And in the EPK of it, I remember saying that creators have to create. And at that time, there was no pandemic, and we weren't really kind of sectioned off as we currently are. But the rules are the same. Creators have to create, and once you make that a part of your mission, then the only left is the follow through. And that's what I've been dedicated to, and that's what this project is an extension of, just the follow through. The creating process, and now it has to go out there. So, yet and still, we have to create more art that can kind of be a conduit for the change that we want to see.
Well, yeah, I totally agree, and thank you for the compliment up front. I've always made it a mission at Neon Jazz to make sure that there's a lot of ways that you can approach this art form, but I think it's really about the artists and their voices. So that's exactly what we want to do around here. I really enjoyed this album. It's said there's so many sonic textures that go into it, but I want to know from you, ultimately, what do you want the listener to get from this experience? How do you want them to feel about this project you put out?
I want the listener to experience the love and joy and the process that went into it, because you have to enjoy what it is that you're doing. Because if you don't enjoy what you're doing, it's very possible and highly probable that the people that are listening aren't going to enjoy what they're listening to, So I wanted to reflect the collective, I'm thinking back to the studio session. We had so much fun. I was surrounded by people who I respect and hold in the highest of esteems. And for the time that we were in the studio, egos were set aside. I had to open myself up, be open to the ideas of others on my music, and that's why I got them. It was a very loose atmosphere. We had a lot of fun. Anytime we get those guys together, there's a lot of laughs. So if there's anything that I wanted people to take away from listening to it, just know that we had fun. And I hope that in listening to it, you really kind of get that transfer of the fun that went into making it. And it starts with, as a composer, just a couple of notes, and just like, okay, that's the vibe that I'm going for. That's what I want to hear. And then you get the musical personalities, and then you put them all together. And then you get into a room, and hopefully the spark of inspiration is in there. And then it all gets documented hopefully it gets documented in a quality where all the instruments can be heard, and you dig everything like that, and then you put it out.
How did these jazz seeds begin for you? How did you get the bug, and how did it kind of evolve as you were younger?
So growing up, I've told this story more than a couple of times. But growing up, when I was going to church, one of the first persons who I saw playing the instrument was a drummer by the name of Lester Grant, and he, I used to always sit right by the drums and hear him play, but he just kind of had a certain way of carrying himself that was super cool, and super laid back, and he looked like he was having fun. So my mother, reached out to him and told him that I was interested in studying the instrument. And at this point, he's 50 years older than me. I mean, I'm a little kid, so he kind of took me under his wing in that way. And then later on, I had the fortune of having some great private instructors, an instructor by the name of Sam Dinkins. But how I kind of got turned on to the music is through Lester Grant, because in addition to playing in the church, he was really a jazz drummer, and that was his thing. So he would tell me about recordings and stuff like that. And then also, as I'm getting a little bit older, some of the hip hop that I was listening to at that time was heavily sampled by jazz recordings. I would check out the liner notes and the production notes and see where they got the samples from. And then I was more interested in finding the Grant Green sample than actually listening to more of the hip hop that I was hearing. And for me, the music at that time, and even still to this day, it didn't sound like anything that was around me. The sonic texture. I remember the first time I heard, Kind of Blue on a tape that one of my mother's friends was playing. It didn't sound like anything I'd heard. It didn't sound like anything on the radio, and I was immediately kind of transfixed by the sonic qualities. Like, wow, how do they do that? Like, how does that sound so cool? Like, and then from that point, it's been a process of discovery and trying to check out as much music as possible, and that's something that I can actually say that I do every day.
What was the first live jazz show you saw that blew you away?
I don't want to rack my brain to try to think about the first jazz show that blew me away. But, because when I first started seeing shows, every one of them blew me away. And this, we're talking about, local musicians who I think were just as talented as any of the big names. So every jazz show that I saw blew me away, and I can't even send. You got to send that question over ahead of time so I can really rack my brain instead of being on the spot. But yeah, I saw a lot of great shows over the years, and I'm still getting blown away by great shows. Yeah, so yeah, I'm with it.
Yeah, totally. What about mentors? What voices have remained in your head? What people have given you great advice that you've just remembered over and over throughout the years?
One of my first teachers, Lester Grant, he always said, don't forget about the blues. That's a great one. I think one of the biggest would be my current mentor. One of my current mentors by the name of Sam Dinkins. And Mr. Dinkins was so important because he was like the one of the first persons that I saw being a professional musician that could really do this, where I saw that, okay, no, this isn't just a hobby. This is something that you get better at. This is something that you have to respect yourself before you expect anybody else to kind of hold you to that same kind of respect. So he was, because I think when he was in college, he was actually a business major. So he took that and applied it to music. So, he's always been my constant inspiration on just how to handle yourself as a musician. Then when I get to college years, I went to the New School in New York, and some of my mentors included the great drummer Michael Carvin and the bass player Reggie Workman. So many great teachers that I had, Kenny Washington, and another great drummer. They all from them, I grabbed little pieces. Then later on, I went to the Juilliard School, and there was a great faculty there as well, you know, with Kenny Barron and, you know, Frank Hembrow, you know, and all of these people. And I learned to try to be as perceptive as possible and try to pull different things from there. So, I mean, there were so many conversations. I will say if I had to sum up all of those experiences in one kind of small idea, I would say if this is what you're going to do, if music is what you're going to do, then try to be as prepared as possible. That means, you know, learning your instrument, learning other instruments, being, you know, as tapped into the history as possible, because you will use all of it in one way or the other. So, yeah, if this is what you're going to do, then the studying never stops.
And the beauty of life is that it's surprisingly cyclical, and because of these mentors, you've become who you are on the bandstand. What do you try to show young players and up-and-comers that you get a gig with? What is it that you want to give them?
You know, I never even think about myself as showing others. If there was anything that I've been shown that I would try to reflect to others, is that the process, that everything, you know, that you just said, that is cyclical, that everything is a process. Every time I play, I'm trying to grow. I'm trying to kind of better myself. And, you know, each kind of coming back to the recorded works, each album is an opportunity to kind of document another side of my musicianship. You know, small, little by little makes big. You know, so be encouraged. I would say that that's probably one thing that I would like for all musicians, especially, to be aware of. Be encouraged, because it's not easy. There's so many things that can sit on the other side and discourage you from accomplishing what it is that you were made to do.
So every day you wake up, you're an artist, you're a creator. What is the most exciting thing about waking up every day knowing that you're a professional musician?
The most exciting part. I live to find new things, to make new connections. And when I say connections, you know, I'm not talking about like business connections, but I wake up and I'm always looking for new ideas, new ways to make connections between something that I'm reading, something that I'm actually seeing when I'm driving to drop my kid off at daycare, or something that I'm hearing. It's like all of this information is swirling around in me. You know, I'm just kind of waiting for these new connections. I'm also, a big part of what I do is I do a lot of teaching as well. I teach some jazz history classes at Hunter College and at the Juilliard School in the evening division. And so I'm always thinking about my next class. I'm like, all right, okay, cool. I'm got a class coming up on Charlie Parker. And I'm like, well, I could just kind of present the standard way of, okay, he's born, this is the day that he's, you know, born, and this is ways that he dies and the date that he dies. But I'm thinking about, like, how can I bring all of the other things that I'm interested in and kind of overlap it over this story? Like, how can I really think about, well, you know, Charlie Parker is actually the head of a new musical movement. It involves all of these other, you know, other musical personalities from then even until, you know, all of the people that he inspires. Like, how can I find the biggest way to make that idea as crystal clear as possible to others? So, you know, this is what I'm you know, always sifting through in my mind as I'm going through my daily routine. So,
you know, if someone last year would have said, you know, over this next year, you're going to watch a virus wipe every possible form of live entertainment out. We're going to go through an unprecedented level of racial, social, and civil upheaval in this country. I don't know that anybody could have ever comprehended what this year was going to bring, but I think what I've noticed out of the jazz community is that there's been a level of strength and vigor, and I think the coming back is going to be a very unique experience. So my question to you is, looking at this from a personal perspective and a community perspective, how is this going to make the jazz community stronger, surviving this very tumultuous period in American history?
I think it's going to make this community in particular stronger in the same way that it's going to make all of us stronger, because this experience has forced us to really reevaluate what we hold dear. You know, when we're going through these things as a collective, not just one situation, not just one. It's easy for your family. It's difficult, but I'll be personal for a second. You know, my mother, I'm originally from Houston, Texas, and I have some family members who are dealing with some material losses from, you know, the storm that the winter weathers and the brutal things. If it was just my family that was going through it, it would be hard on me, and it would be hard on, you know, them and stuff like that. But when you have a collective of people that are like going through something very similar and everybody's been affected, now we all have to like reassess. Well, what are these materials, you know, what are these material possessions really worth? You know, and you can always look on the bright side. It's just like, okay, I might have lost everything. Not that I know anybody in my family that lost everything, but some people did. Some people lost loved ones. And you're just like, wow, you know, what can I be grateful for? So now let's expand that to a situation like, you know, the context of COVID, where everybody's life has been affected. Now we all have to reassess, like, well, what's important to me? You know, health, that I can wake up and I have my faculties, that I can still practice, that I can still, you know, strengthen my resolve in what I believe, so that when things do open, if they do open, if they go back to some semblance of how they were, that I will be ready. And if they don't, then I still have to be able to adapt to whatever the scene will look like for that particular time. So, you know, I think the answer is somewhere in there.
It is, man. That's great. That's a great answer. So, you know, the world's kind of waking up now, and I think there's things that we're starting to see. And it's almost shocking that, you know, I'm hearing things that are opening up, and baseball is going to start. They're going to have fans in the stands and all these things. Or you're going to get back on stage. And when you do, and when we get back in the audience, what do you hope we realize about this long absence away from live jazz?
The importance of the music. The importance of the music. In particular to jazz, one of the main tenets of this music is improvisation. And even though in the context of you know, music and life and thinking about the sharing of ideas, because all these things happen on the bandstand, you know, it's a beautiful thing. But we deal with, I think one of the reasons why this music has the ability to resonate with so many is because we do that in our lives, like problem solving. Like that's all, you know, that's what jazz is all about, musical problem solving and collaboration. And when people get back on the stage, I would hope that the audience members, as well as the performers, realize just how special it is that what we're holding, you know, what we are vessels for. Like, that's a very special thing. And it is something that I believe can withstand the pandemic. Trust me, I don't want this to happen, but even if all the clubs close, this music would still has the ability to still live on, because it is not dependent on solely existing in clubs. Now, that's a part of it. I definitely don't want to diminish that. That's a part of it. But the basic core idea and principles of this music, you know, they live inside of us, whether there's any clubs or not.
Yeah, me too, man. Yeah, that's a big fear. I know, even here in Kansas City, but you're totally right. I think about how I've, you know, over the years grown into this love of jazz, and it will never go away no matter what. And we've been through things like this. I mean, the birth of bebop was during a time of a lot of tumultuous things going on in the country. I mean, we had post-war racism in a way that no one ever saw, clubs getting burnt down. And you know what? Those cats didn't do it because of a capitalistic venture. They did it because they felt it. You know,
absolutely. They felt it, and they lived it, and they loved it. I mean, this music has always been at the forefront of bringing people together. You know, when haven't we had strife in this country? You know, it's been there in the 70s, it's been there in the 80s, depending on where you were. It's been there in the 90s, and we're seeing the manifestation of these unresolved issues in the 2000s and the 2020s, and we will continue to see it. It's a constant. We're engaged in a constant fight for survival and to highlight the good of what we do. But this music has always been at the forefront of bringing people together, of breaking down those walls. Even, you know, before Jackie Robinson integrates baseball in '47, I have a book right here. Before he even did that, you know, musicians were on the stage shoulder to shoulder, black and white. You know, Benny Goodman. Even before that, they were on the stage playing together in this brotherhood of you know, bounded by this beautiful music. That's our collective history.
Yeah. I got to go back to the beginning of our conversation here. The thing that I'm amazed that the stories that come from musicians are the revelations that I hear like that. They're always so wise and revelatory and true, and that's beautiful. What a great idea, because we're all under a guise of certain things in American history, but when you look in the truth, it's undeniable.
Absolutely.
So my final question to you is this. Everyone has a perception of you and who they think you are, your family, your friends, your fans. But you're the one that's ultimately living your life. Who do you think you are?
I think I'm a student of the music. I hope to be a student of the music. I hope to be someone that reflects all the positive, you know, and life-giving, you know, vibes of all that's good. That's what I hope to be. That's what I hope to be, you know. And it's a daily process. So.
Yep, I can vouch for it. With what I've heard in music and word, it makes sense to me. Reggie, thank you for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz, and thank you for doing what you're doing for the jazz community.
Thank you so much, Joe. I appreciate you calling, and anytime.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest cats in Houston, New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Reggie for his time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com for everything Neon Jazz all the time. Go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.